Hello everyone, my name is Kudzie Mapiye, and on this channel I do videos about my life living here in Australia, and I also share different life lessons that I've learned along the way. In today's video I'm going to be talking about moving to Australia with family and the important things that you need to consider. And for the purposes of this video, I'm going to be talking about families that are like in a partnership with children. So maybe a husband and wife and kids. I know there are different family setups, but I get a lot of questions about where people are moving as a couple and they have children. And I just wanted to share in this video some important considerations that I think will be helpful for families with that kind of setup planning to move to Australia, to help you really get the best out of Australia and get the best out of your experience, and to be able to maximize your achievements while you are in Australia. And today I'm going to be focusing on three main points. The first point being, or I'm going to kind of structure them in a question form, like the type of questions that I get from people is, should we both be working when we move to Australia? So many times when you get families that are moving with children, they usually have like a husband and a wife who are both qualified and have worked previously, and when they come to Australia they want to know, can they both, like, should they both work? And this is mainly in the case when they have younger children who are usually like the age that hasn't started school yet. So they're usually like infants, toddlers, that kind of age, and they're still in daycare. So my thoughts on that, about like, you know, should two people start working, I think, you know, there's a lot to consider. It's really not a straightforward question. Some of the things to consider are the cost of living. The cost of living in Australia is pretty high, and it's getting higher. And when it comes to affordability, a dual income is always better, where two people are working and bringing in income. That always is better when it comes to balancing the bills and balancing all your other financial needs. But the other thing, like, you can counter that cost of living dilemma by choosing cheaper accommodations, living in like cheaper areas to rent, etc. Downsizing, like maybe you have two kids, instead of having like a 3 or 4 bedroomed house or apartment, you can opt for a 2-bedroom apartment, and you know, your kids can share a room if that's something that is practical for your family. Like that is something that you can do to minimize the cost. I always think it's a good idea for both parents to work, but I don't think it's a good idea for them to work at the same time. And what I mean is, I feel like the best outcome comes when one person goes to work for a period of time, maybe a few months, and then the other like partner or the other parent stays at home and just sets things up a little bit. Like if you both get up and going, like Australian workplaces, like they're a whole different arena. Like people are just go, working very hard. So it does become hard to balance life and family most times. So especially if you're like newly migrated and you've got a lot of settling in to do, a lot of assimilation to do, you really want to be able to settle down first. So I think it's always a good idea for one of the partners to stay home for at least a few months and settle down first. And this helps if you've implemented the first thing that I said, is when you have downsized, when you have minimized your costs as much as possible, and you know, you shop at cheaper areas, like, you know, instead of going to bigger supermarkets, you can shop at places like Aldi. You can get your fruit and veg at like fruit shops and markets, which is, you know, significantly cheaper than when you go to like, you know, the bigger stores. So you can do things like that to help minimize your costs. I think it'll be very helpful, because there can be situations when both people come into Australia and both of them start working at the same time, and then they're trying to balance things, and sometimes things don't balance, and it's very common for people who are new migrants to end up having relationship issues, sometimes to the point of separation, because migration is a big life change, just like having children, like just like other big life changes. Moving to a whole different country is huge. Moving to a whole different country with a family is just out of this world. So you really need to figure out how you can best balance that in order to keep your family intact and in order to support each other. So I always think, set up things first at home, because it's no use going out there and trying to get your career established and everything when you're coming home and things are like all over the place. It's always good to the person who can, if there's someone who can stabilize things at home, make sure you have all the furnishings, like you have routines for the kids, you have everything established before you go off and work at the same time. I think that will be, very helpful, especially for those couples with 2 kids. And I mean, with young kids, can be 2 kids, but yeah, I think that is such an important consideration, to stagger that time. Like, don't go like both into the workplace like immediately, because it could be a little bit stressful and it can take a little bit longer for you to settle in. Now, the second question is, for that same family setup, is it better to first move, like usually when people migrate and they're a family, it's usually one of the partners has had a job opportunity or something, and then the other partner has to find work. So in rare cases, both the husband and the wife, they get like this job opportunities in a different country at the same time. Sometimes that does happen, but in the normal case that it's only one partner that has gotten a job, is it better for you to leave your family behind first and then come and get settled? Now, that is a question I get a lot, like from people who are looking to move to Australia. They always ask, is it better for me to leave my kids and my family behind so I can establish myself first? Now, same thing, it's not that straightforward. There are so many different things to consider. I think that, establishing yourself in another country, it does take a lot of time. Things like accommodation in Australia these days, I'll focus mainly on Brisbane, where I live. Accommodation in Brisbane is not very easy to get at the moment. There are a lot of waiting lists, like there's a shortage of housing. So you might find it easier to get like share accommodation, for example, where you're living in a full house and you're renting a room and you're living with other roommates. Now, that is not an ideal situation to have if you have a family. But if you feel that, that is how you can get started, if you've got a job offer already, you've got a start date and you just need to come into the country, it might be easier to just come in, like have very basic accommodation while you settle in, and then while you're here, try and find bigger accommodation for your family. Trust me, it can take a couple of months to find ideal accommodation for a family. That is the current reality in Brisbane at the moment. And there's also like people who are employed are finding themselves homeless, not because they don't have money, but because there's just a shortage of accommodation. So you might want to consider that is it better for one person to come and they can live maybe with a friend? Like, it's hard to live with a friend. Imagine if you've got kids and a wife and husband, and it just might be a little bit too much. So if it's one person, it can be a little bit more manageable. So if people have that option, it might be better to leave your family behind, provided it is safe and they're safe to be left behind. Because let's be honest, there are times when parents have gone overseas, they've left children with family, and those children have been abused. Those are very unfortunate situations, but they do happen. So make sure that the children are in a safe place. So it might be with your partner, maybe if you're leaving them in the in an environment that they're used to, with one of their parents, like, with a parent, whether you leave them with a wife or your, the husband stays with the kids, whatever the case, and then they, they're in a stable school, they're having their normal routines, while the other parent tries to find suitable accommodation, tries to navigate the country, and then get to bring them over. I think that is a good solution if it is safe to do so. I don't think it's a good solution if, for example, you want to come and then you want to leave your kids with someone who they haven't stayed with. It might be a relative, but they haven't stayed with that person ever, or maybe they haven't stayed with that person for a long period of time. Things can become tricky because sometimes people can say yes, People can say, of course, bring the kids over, we'll look after them. And then once your kids come over, they become overwhelmed, and those children are not treated well. Or sometimes people can use you as a cash cow. Of course, bring your children over, and they start like siphoning money from you and saying, oh, we need this for the kids, we need this for the kids. And now it becomes harder for you to settle because you have to constantly send money back home in large amounts because there are all these needs that have arisen for your children. So those are some important things to consider as well. If they're in a safe space, in a safe environment that they're used to, or maybe they go to like boarding schools and, during the holidays, they stay with someone they're used to, that can be a good option to give you some time to just properly settle in, find out, like, get them good schools, find out which areas are good for school and everything, get yourself located, get some furniture. It's an expensive exercise to move because when you move, you need to buy furniture. You need to buy couches, you need to buy beds, TVs, fridges. Like, there's a lot to invest when you're moving in, like when you're first establishing yourself in a country. So you have to think about those things, and it might be better if you do have that option to come and set that up first. And you have to be so focused about doing that and not get consumed in the life here, and then forget about, I need to set up a space for my family, and then you prolong the whole process. I think if you're really determined, if you know what you want, you know what you're doing, you've set time frames for yourself and say, you know what, I'm going to go there. In the next 6 months, I need to have established myself. I'll do everything within my power to establish myself in this country so that my family can come over. I know there are families, migrants families that have done that and they have succeeded. It is a viable option. So it might be something to consider. And then it's also a good option for your family to come at the same time. Like, if you think, because there are some companies, when they offer work, they offer you accommodation that is suitable for a family. And so you don't have to look around for accommodation and all that. So it might be possible for your family to just come over with you, and then, you can settle down all together. Leading to my third and final point: support required for new families. Now, this is like the bedrock of everything. Understanding the support that you're going to need to provide each other, because when you move to a new country, there's a lot of things happening. You need to adjust to the culture. There can be massive culture shock. I've actually created a video playlist purely about culture shock. Like, you can experience a whole lot of culture shock when you first move to a new country, and some of it might be quite challenging to navigate. So you need to support each other. And the other thing is this: if you're husband and wife, you're not going to experience things the same way depending on your personal backgrounds and life experiences. There might be one partner who settles in faster and better, and there might be one partner who struggles a little bit to settle in. So you need to find out what you need to be consistently communicating with each other, to check in with each other how you're going, because you might settle in and you're thinking, wow, this is good, I love this life, and your partner is struggling, and they just not having as good a time as you are because they're just not able to navigate life in that country as easily. So checking with your partner, make sure you're providing them the support. Don't leave them behind. If you're discovering new things, if you're making new friends, just try and bring your partner along. Try and make sure that they're also doing well. And sometimes partners can be different personalities. Some people may be more outgoing. It's easier for them to settle into new environments. Some people can be a little bit more reserved and it takes them a little bit longer to settle in. So always support your partner. Make sure that they're doing okay. If you're doing better, make sure you kind of guide them, tell them what's working for you, try to discover what could work for them, and don't rush the process. Move at their pace. Like, don't try and like drag them to like, hey, you should be feeling good about this country by now. No, just walk with them where they are. Try and understand what their challenges are and try and support them and try and get the necessary supports that you can. It could be family support that they need, or it could be support that is available already in Australia that can help them to navigate life in Australia. So don't leave your partner behind. Another layer to that, your children. If your children are going to be going to school, you need to understand as well that they're going to be facing their own challenges, and they're going to be facing their own culture shock, and they're going to be navigating a different environment. The learning style at school might be different. The type of friends that they have might be different. The whole environment is different. So your kids are also experiencing a lot of change and they also need support. So it's important to check in with your kids, make sure they're okay. Make sure you know what's happening in their world. If you've got more than one child, it's even more complex because children are different. They have different personalities. For example, my 2 children couldn't have been more different when it comes to personality. They are so different. So they've got different needs, and you need to understand what their different unique needs are and support them accordingly. And don't leave them behind as well. If you and your partner are doing well and you've settled in, like, don't forget that your kids can be having a hard time as well, and don't rush their process as well. Make sure that you support them as much as you can. Check in with them, find out if they're having any challenges at school, if you need to move their schools, if you need to intervene in anything. Like, don't leave them behind. I think sometimes people think that children are so resilient and children can handle anything. Nothing can be further from the truth. Like, children need a lot of support, whether they're younger or they're a little bit older. Children need a lot of support. So don't neglect to support your kids when they're transitioning, to a new country, when they're navigating all these massive changes, new environment, new area. Maybe it could be different weather. There could be so many things that they have to navigate. So I find that the families that do very well are the families that offer each other support and they check in on each other, and they're not like keen to just rush and achieve. They settle first to make sure everybody is okay, everyone is navigating life okay. Support the person who needs the most support in the family. Make sure they're having debriefs, like, how are things going for you at work? How are things going for you at school? How are things going for you with friends? Are you able to find friends? Make sure you have a lot of family time to really debrief and support each other, especially in the early stages when you first move in, because sometimes you might just shoot up and just, enjoy your life and you leave your whole family behind. That is another major factor for relationship breakdowns when people move overseas, is that someone in the family has found it difficult to navigate, and they haven't been offered the support by their partner, or they feel like the partner doesn't care, or they're just worrying about themselves. And that that can be very hurtful. So make sure you support each other, your partner, your kids. Make sure that you're always checking in daily. Like, so many things can happen in a day. When I talk to my kids about how their day was, sometimes I get exhausted. I'm like, whoa, all in a day? Like, how is that possible? But a lot of things happen. Like, when I check in with my husband, how his day was. Like, when I talk about how my day was, like, there's a lot that happens every single day. So make sure you're checking in with each other every single day. You're making space for each other. Don't worry about catching up with TV shows, catching up with social media. When you first settle into a country, the most important thing is to catch up with each other and to support each other, and the rest can come afterwards. All right, guys, I hope you found that video helpful. If you have any questions, concerns, like just anything interesting, please put it down in the comments below. I always love interacting with you in the comments, and I will see you in my next video.